your way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Oh, just 1 month ago. Oh, wow. Where did you meet him? He was there? Oh, yeah. I do know Neil. Neil and, yes. Yes. He was here with his partner. Yes. Wow. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Welcome to CalEarth. My name is Nader Khalili, and my brother Dastan. And we've been running CalEarth with our team for almost, I guess, we're coming up on 12 years now, ever since our father passed away in 2008. And the first Saturday of every month, as far back as we can go, we've been doing open house. So CalEarth's been here since 1991. Since our 28-year anniversary. And yeah, the first Saturday every month we gather everybody up and we tell stories and kind of just share about our father and, you know, just kind of share a little bit about it. So I know you all went on the tour just now. I hope you enjoyed that. This place is really interesting because, you know, when you come here, you see everything, it's done, there's all these amazing buildings, and you know, it's not always, I think, that you get time to spend and hear the actual, like, the origin stories of how it all came together. But once you hear them, it makes it that much more special. So I'll tell you a little bit about my father. So he grew up in Iran. He was one of 9 children in a very, very poor family. He grew up, you know, real extreme poverty. Just it was, you know, sort of 2 pairs of shoes per person. I mean, really, really, really extreme. After high school, he left. He went to Turkey. He studied architecture there. He spent about 6 months in Turkey, and then he traveled across Europe. He hitchhiked all the way to Rotterdam, and from Rotterdam he took a boat to the United States. This is like 1959. So he took a boat. He arrived in the United States. He, you know, spoke very little English. He just had a Persian English dictionary, a backpack, a couple of shirts, maybe like, you know, $60 something. And when he was on the boat from Rotterdam, this American woman was on the boat as well, and she wrote the letters YMCA on a piece of paper, and she gave it to him, and she said, "Go here." And he was like, "Okay." You know. So he flew to San Francisco from New York, and he went to the YMCA. He found his way there. At that time, you're able to rent rooms. So he rented a small room, and within a couple of weeks, you know, he had run out of money. So he was eating like saltine crackers, and he's like, "Okay, I got to go find a job. Let me figure out what to do." So he found this temporary job placement center in Berkeley, and he would take the bus every day to and from Berkeley and go to this job placement center. And he knew how to ask for a job. Do you have a job? He knew how to say yes, no, maybe, please, sure, those kinds of words. Okay. So he went to the job placement center day after day, day after day. And there was a young woman who worked there, and she really came to like him because he was such a friendly guy, you know. And he would say, "Do you have a job?" And she would say, "No, sorry, come back tomorrow," you know. So he came back finally one day, and she said, "Actually, something just opened up. Do you know anything about the stock market?" He said, yes, sure, yes, sure. And she was like, "Okay, great. Well, this is the address. Go here tomorrow at this time." Okay, great. So he goes home, and he knew what a market was. As a place that you could buy and sell. You already know the joke. It hasn't even happened yet. So he goes to the word stock in his Persian English dictionary, and what does it say? It says cattle, herd. Like, this is a true story. It's like, amazing. I came to America, and I found a cowboy job, like, for a thing. This is going to be great. You guys can sit down if you want. There's plenty of seats over here. Feel comfortable. Anyway, so the next morning he puts on his dirtiest shirt and pants, and he goes down to the address he's given. Where does he end up? He's in San Francisco, right? So he ends up in the financial district in downtown San Francisco. Oh my God. And he's like, something is not right here. Luckily, he got there early. He goes up to the window of this building. It's all glass, and he looks through, and he sees all these men in suits and ties. This is before computers, so they're writing numbers up on chalkboards and erasing them on the phone, and there's telegrams and all this stuff, and he's like, I don't know what this is, you know. But he runs to the Salvation Army. He thinks quick. He goes and buys a tie for 19 cents, and he goes back. And that was his first day of work in America. So he spent a little time doing that, and then he picked up some other odd jobs. He eventually made his way down California, and he got someone to train him to become a draftsman. So he trained to become a draftsman, and then he trained a few here, a little bit there, and he actually became an architect, a licensed architect in the state of California through apprenticeship, which is, I don't even know if you can do that anymore, but so that's how he trained. It took him like 8 or 9 years to learn all the different skills necessary to pass the licensing exam. And by early mid-60s, he was a fully licensed architect. His specialty was high-rise construction. He helped design some of the parking structures at LAX at that time, and he was working in East LA near the Watts Towers, and just regular architect life. And then he decided to go back to Iran. So in the 60s, the U.S. and Iran had a more positive relationship. Everyone can remember back that far. So he went back. There was like 30,000 Americans living in Iran at the time. There was American companies there. And my father became a very successful urban developer. So he was bidding on big projects and working all throughout Tehran and the regions in that area. And so he had sort of succeeded, right, as an architect and come and gotten his education and gone back. And but he was so miserable. He absolutely hated what he was doing. He was so stressed out and just, was looking for something more. So the story goes that one day he took my brother Dasson to a park. Now, I think I tell the story better, so you can decide. But I wasn't even there. But I think I tell the story the best. So anyway, they go to the park. Dasson was maybe 3 years old at the time, and all the other kids at the park are running races. And so my father encouraged Dasson to go run with the kids, and so he takes off, and they all go running. And Dasson is the smallest of all the kids and slowest. He was maybe a little bit lazy. I don't know. I wasn't there. Anyway, poor guy kept coming in last place, and he kept losing the race. So he's so upset. He was sort of crying, and goes to my father, and he says, Bubba, I want to race alone. And so my father was like, you have moments with 3-year-olds where you have to decide, like, am I going to use this as a lesson, or am I just going to let him do what he's asking and just, like, let him be free? So he chose a ladder, and he said, okay, Dasson, whatever you want. So the other kids left, and he drew a line, and he said, okay, Dasson, 1, 2, 3, go. And Dasson took off running. By the end, he wasn't even running anymore. He was just walking. He just forgot, And he came back, but he had brought a leaf that had fallen on the path. It was from a sycamore tree. And then he went around again, and he brought a flower, and he went around again and again. And my father was sitting in the park, and he was watching Dasson, and he was like, wow, like, what is it that about that we always feel the need that we have to race against somebody else, It's like there's just this tendency, that's the way that we work, right? And it's like, okay, so you beat them, so maybe you exceeded them by a little bit, but if you race alone, you have this opportunity to keep meeting and exceeding your own expectations, And my father would say, and then no matter what happens, you're always in first place. It's just you against you, And so really shortly thereafter, he sold his share of his architecture, practice. He bought a motorcycle, and he went into the desert. And he spent about 5 years traveling throughout the desert regions of Iran, studying earth architecture. He knew how to build with an unlimited budget. That was easy. He would say, I need this much steel, lumber, whatever, order it for me, and then I'll come do your project. But he was like, well, what about everybody else, What about all these people in the parts of the world that don't have access to these unlimited budgets? How are we building for them? If housing is a basic human right, like, what are we doing in that case? So he started studying earth architecture. It's indigenous to Iran, as well as many other parts of the world. And he would go to all these small villages that had these amazing adobe structures, to kind of research them and better understand them. And he came to some villages, and things were in good shape, and then other places there had been too much rain or too much snow in a year, and the roof of the earthen house had collapsed. And so he started kind of research, like, well, what could we do? Is there a way to improve this? Same technology, but kind of bring it a little bit up. And he came up with this idea. Well, this is made of clay, same as like a ceramic pot. What if you fired a structure? What if you set this building on fire and you turned it to ceramic? Then it wouldn't have those same kinds of problems, etc. He had these great ideas. So he was written this little notebook. He had his motorcycle. He was going as a stranger coming into villages. And he was literally telling these little village people, these people in these small villages, I have this great idea. I'd like to set your house on fire. It didn't go too well at first. But then one day he came to this village that had a brick kiln that they weren't using it anymore, but they used to use it for, firing and selling bricks. And he basically, told these villagers, said, tell me about this kiln. And they said, oh, it's been here a long time. And he said, how strong is this? They said, oh my gosh, you could, shoot a cannonball at this, nothing would happen. He said, this is what I want to do. I basically want to turn your house into a kiln. And it's made of the same material. Can we just do it? And so he managed to get somebody to agree. My father was, I think, part magician. I don't know. He had a twinkle in his eye. He was able to kind of go through life in a way that is really admirable. And these amazing moments like that happened, that he literally was able to get somebody to agree. They fired this structure, pre-existing, it's not great research initially, but they were able to do it, and they were left this amazing glazed structure that after 48 hours was fired and super beautiful. And then after that, he got commissioned to build a school, a girls' school outside of Tehran, about 10, I think it had 10 classrooms. It's still there to this day, and it was a fired Adobe school. He was calling it ceramic houses at the time. That was his kind of first research concept that he put together. And then at this point, so now it's 1979, 1980, the revolution has started in Iran, this political turmoil, and he decided he needed to leave. He was like, I'm not a politician, I'm just an architect, and if I'm going to do my work, it has to be somewhere where people will actually be able to access it. So he came back to the United States, and he started traveling around. He had all these photos and all these models of his work, and he was going around talking about building with the universal principles, earth, water, air, fire. And he had this whole speech that he had prepared, and he would go around with one of those slide projector wheels.
We're a disaster charity and an educational institute. As a disaster charity, our ultimate goal is to respond to natural disasters, man-made disasters, things that happen around the world, and to create the most efficient delivery system for this technology so that if anyone is in a situation where housing and safety is not available, they can be empowered as soon as possible and regain their dignity and realize that no matter what happens, they can build a shelter for themselves that's fireproof, hurricane-proof, tornado-proof, earthquake-resistant, works in harmony with nature, and they can teach others as well. And the offshoot of that is, as an educational institute, you can come here and you can study this system as well and learn how to build in the environment and become empowered in that way. We believe that it is a human right to be able to build your own home that is in harmony with nature, that can last for generations. It's okay to have contractors and architects and banks and loans. These things are fine as part of society, but it is a human right to be able to have shelter. Today there's over 1.2 billion people in the world who are homeless, and the solution is right under their feet. This work is based on 5 elements: earth, water, air, fire, and Rumi. Rumi is a 13th century Persian poet and philosopher. And this architecture, the core of what you see in a very tangible way, was inspired by Rumi. As Shifta said, my father was an urban developer, extremely successful, built high-rises, but he was unsatisfied. Because how can so many people suffer? How can there be such inequality in the world as we know it? There has to be a solution. And the ultimate point of that solution is empowerment. And what he realized is he had to develop a system that anybody, anywhere in the world could learn and utilize. Okay? And that's why he developed this system. So Super Adobe is basically very simple. You're taking the earth under your feet, you're putting it in these long sandbags, you're filling them with these long sandbags, tamping it down so it's flat, and then you're placing barbed wire on top of the sandbag. And then you do the next layer, a bag and a barbed wire. The barbed wire is a tension element, which makes it into a monolithic structure. And as a result, it becomes so powerful. The bags themselves take maybe about 300 pounds per square inch of pressure, if that. They're not particularly strong. But the key to this architecture, what makes it so effective, the open secret about it is the principle of gravity and the geometry of the arch. So this arch right here, if you take this arch and you repeat it back to back, it becomes a vaulted structure, like Earth 1, for example, or the triple vault over there. If you spin it on its axis, it becomes a dome. The reason this particular form is so strong is that when there's weight and energy on top of it, it takes that energy and it puts it into the earth. So gravity is actually beneficial to this structure. Flat roof, pitch roof, eventually gravity is going to pull that in. But if you go into lava tubes, caves, things like that that have been around for millions, billions of years, under millions of tons of pressure, why are they still standing? The geometry of the arch and the principle of gravity. So we take those elements and apply the bags and the barbed wire, and we're able to create what you see here today. And that's what makes it Super Adobe. Okay? So as an example of this, what I'm going to ask is our two instructors here, they're going to build an arch for you using this form, and they're only going to use bricks and pebble rocks. No mortars, no adhesive, anything like that. And based on the geometry and the principle of gravity, you'll see how it will stand. And that's why these structures can withstand hurricanes, tornadoes. They're aerodynamic. They're fireproof because of the element of the earth. And as a result, you can build yourself a home. You can build yourself a structure or teach other people to do it. And they're empowered for generations. These structures can last hundreds and hundreds of years. So by the time your mortgage is paid off, you don't have to start rebuilding your house. Okay? You can keep passing it on. Now, as I was saying, this architecture is based on the elements earth, water, air, fire, and the poet Rumi. How is Rumi associated with this work? Shifta gave you an example of some of the stories. But my father was a Rumi poet translator, and he literally translated this poetry from Farsi to English. And for example, when he started doing this caloric work, as you'll see, there's a lot of deficiencies in the architecture. There's some cosmetic cracks, things are falling apart. As a result, the reason that is that way is because this place is a giant laboratory. This is where we do all of our experimentation, whether it's for material, standardization, things like that. So we let things fall apart because we're always studying them. But anyway, so he started building these structures here, and one day he saw a giant crack outside one of the buildings, and he said, oh my goodness, this building is cracked on the outside. I know it's not going to affect the structural integrity of the building, but cosmetically, if someone sees that crack, they're going to say, well, this isn't a safe building. Look, it's cracking. So he started losing sleep on this. Every day and night, oh my, what am I going to do about these cracks? So he decided he went to Rumi, and he opened the Rumi book, and he came across a poem that says, "Az anche ke milarzi, midon haman arzi." That which you fear now is your true worth. So he thought about this, and he said, oh my goodness, I'm afraid of cracks. So my true worth is a crack. I'm worth a crack. When I see a crack, I can't go past that. That fear is my limitation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to embrace the crack. I'm going to embrace that fear. I'm going to look at cracks everywhere. I'm going to start studying cracks. And as he started looking at nature, he realized, actually, there are no perfect surfaces. Everything is cracked. Every tree, bark, human skin with the cells. He started looking at reptiles, snakes, lizards. My God, they're all covered with cracks. Why is that? Why does nature do that? And for example, he looked at the lizard and he said, each crack is a scale. This lizard is covered with scales. Each scale creates a sun and shade zone. It dispenses, it breaks up the water, it creates extra protection. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cover my buildings with cracks. So he developed this reptiling system, as you see here, or on the outside, all the little bulbs, right? All those little bulbs, all those cracks, they disperse water. Each one is a sun and shade zone, creating extra passive heating and cooling, creating an extra layer on the structure for protection. And in this way, this poetry, this storytelling informed the architecture that you see now. And it's not just architecture, okay? When you come and you study here, the way you become empowered is is not, oh, I can build this way. What it is taking the scales off of your eye so that when you show up in a place you're going to build, the environment itself is telling you what you should build. When you show up, you know how to look at the soil. You know how to analyze the movement of the season. You know if it's arid, if it's wet. And all of those elements will inform you of how to build your structure to be the best, most efficient possible structure. And that's what we teach you. Okay? That's how you become empowered to understand how that works. Now, we talk about sustainability, and the truth of the matter is that the only thing that's sustainable is the earthquake, is the hurricane, is the flood, is the tornado, is the fire. It has been there for millions and billions of years, and it'll keep coming back. Okay? What we see are not natural disasters. What we see are man-made disasters. We are expecting Mother Nature to somehow behave differently for us, but that's ridiculous. And the mistake that we make is that we go back building the same thing, expecting a different result. Most sentient creatures on the planet use available resources and materials. So can we. The most abundant material in the world is the earth under your feet. Right? Kamoli garchov girat zarashavan. Earth turns to gold in the hands of the wise. And when you understand these open secrets, these scales fall, suddenly you see it's all potential. It's not limitation. And that is your birthright. Okay? That's every human right. And so what we do is we say, come and study, learn this technology, whether it's online, whether it's a disaster situation, we go and we teach people so that each person becomes